There are a lot of people involved in the typical real estate transaction, and if you're like most people, you don't know what they do, who hires them, or who pays them. So in this video, I'm breaking down the 7 key players in any real estate transaction, so you're better educated. But first, I'm Hold It with PM Jen, a real estate investment educator, advocate, and I am passionate about making buy and hold investment possible for everyday Americans. Let's not waste any time. The first person in the transaction we're going to talk about is the realtor, the one that you probably know about. And if you do an on-market deal, meaning it's on MLS, that means the seller of the property has hired a realtor to list it and place it on the market. So that person is the seller agent. They are hired by the seller. They're generally paid a negotiated commission of the selling price to that selling agent for that job. And their job is to list it, arrange showings, negotiate on behalf of their client, and to some extent guide the process. Now, if you're in an on-market deal and you're the buyer, you don't have to have representation. That's not a rule, but you certainly can. And if you choose to hire a realtor for that, that would be a buyer agent. Now, if I had made this video a little bit more than a year ago, I'd be talking about how, and the buyer doesn't pay the buyer agent. In fact, the seller agent takes the commission they make and they would split it with the buyer agent. But that is no longer always happening. It can happen and it certainly can be negotiated that way, but it doesn't always, and it's not the de facto solution anymore. So if you're working with a buyer agent, you want to be crystal clear how that person is going to be compensated for the work they're performing for you on the transaction. The next person in the transaction also doesn't have to be there, but could, and that's the lender. So if you're choosing to use debt in your purchase, you're going to need a lender, and that is typically a mortgage broker. You could be talking to a loan officer at a bank. You could even be going private, so maybe working with a private money lender. These people make their money off of loan origination fees and interest. So those are typically what we call the compensation that the lender's getting for the service of loaning you the funds to finance your deal. The job of the lender is to qualify the borrower, structure the deal, and then fund the deal. The next player in your transaction also might not be there, but usually they are, and that's the appraiser. So the appraiser's job is to value the property, to be an objective source of information, to give you and the bank the information they need to know how much that property is worth, to understand if the loan they're making is justified to the value of the property. Now, like I said, they might not be involved in every deal. When there's a bank loan, there is typically an appraisal. And in that case, the bank's going to hire and pay the appraiser. Now, you will be paying for it as the borrower on your settlement sheet. So that is your expense, but you don't typically write the check out to, Acme Appraisal Inc. The bank would be doing that. The bank chooses the appraiser. The borrower is not allowed to participate in choosing the appraiser. This needs to be a true objective source of information. Now, you might choose to have an appraiser on a deal where it's not required. So maybe I'm choosing to buy a property and I'm not using any financing, or I'm not using so much financing that the bank is requiring an appraisal. I can decide to have an appraisal done at my expense and choose and hire whoever I want, because in that case, it really is me seeking the information. Appraisers can be hired for all variety of reasons to value real estate, but when we talk about real estate sales transactions, they're almost always hired by the bank, the lender that is issuing the loan. The inspector is one of the people in the deal, right? So it's pretty typical to put a contingency on your deal that says subject to a property inspection, and you hire a property inspector to come out, and it could be just a general property inspector. You could be doing septic inspections, pest control inspections, perk tests. All those things are versions of inspections. Those inspectors are hired by the buyer and paid by the buyer. And their job is to bring an expert opinion on the condition of the property that you're buying so that you can analyze it and see if it's to your risk taste. The next person is going to be the title company or title agent. Title companies are paid with title insurance premiums and closing fees. These are fees paid by the buyer, and the job of the title company or title agent is to execute a search on the title of the property and ensure that it's clean, free of defects, free of liens so that when you buy the property, you're not surprised by a blur on the deed. The title agent's going to ensure clear title and issue title insurance. Next up, we have the closing attorney or escrow officer. This is a neutral legal third party whose job it is to act as an intermediary and put this deal together and then finally record it. They'll charge what they call settlement or closing fees, a lump sum that's paid at closing, and it's paid by the buyer. And the closing attorney is responsible for preparing documents, holding the funds possibly in escrow, and then recording the deed after it's all been finished. And that brings us to the last one in the deal, and that would be your insurance agent. So this would be the buyer has to go find insurance for their property, and they would find the right insurance policy, execute on it. They would choose that, hire that person, and that insurance agent is compensated with insurance premiums. Do you see how many people are involved in your real estate transaction? And sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. Get educated on what these people are doing and find people who work really well with you and your deals so that you have some consistency over time in the people that you're working with and that are representing you. I hope you appreciate this real practical information I'm bringing you. Let me know what else you're confused about or want to know more about, and follow me on all the socials. I am on TikTok, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and right here on YouTube. See you next time.